Well, hello, amigas, and welcome to Amiga Handle Your Shit podcast. I am so excited that I get to interview a friend of mine. His name is Luis Cornejo. And so, amigas, let me tell you a little bit about Luis. Luis is a natural entertainer who enjoys making others laugh and feel inspired. As a licensed marriage and family therapist and certified sex therapist, I like that, Luis works tirelessly to support the LGBTQ plus and BIPOC communities. Luis is also the founder of Psychosocial Media, a mental health platform providing mental health services. He's also the co-founder of Social Therapy, which is a private practice specializing in LGBTQ plus and BIPOC mental health. In addition to his professional achievements, he is also an indie queer model who has a deep passion for fashion, visibility, and self-expression. Luis has collaborated with local and international designers. Luis recently launched his Queer Magic Entertainment LLC to continue his work in the entertainment industry. Through this podcast, his podcast called Queer Magic and other creative endeavors. Luis is a firm believer that the media plays a massive role in the way mental health is understood and wants to use his knowledge to increase awareness. As a testament to his work, Luis has been featured on Telemundo, a large Spanish network, multiple times. In the past appearances on Telemundo, Luis has talked about anxiety, depression, LGBTQ plus issues, and other mental health topics in Spanish. So, amigas, you're in for a wonderful conversation, and I'm so glad you're here to hear everything he has to say. So, without further ado, this is Luis Cornejo. Hello, amigas, and welcome to Amiga Handle Your Shit podcast. How exciting! I get to interview Luis Cornejo, who's known as the Queer Magic Maker. And so this is so fabulous, amigas. So let me say a little bit about how I was able to get him on the podcast. I had a beautiful event with my girlfriend, Adriana Palomares, which I'm sure you've heard, on my book tour. And he was at the event, and I was like, you must be on Amiga Handle Your Shit. And he said yes. So I'm like, oh my God, yes, let's talk. Let's introduce you to my community, because these girls here, these amigas, they love to hear about everything and anything. And I know that's up your alley, Luis, because I know you're a therapist, so you've heard it all.
I have. And thank you so much for the invite, Jackie. I was really inspired by you and Adriana's stories, and you two just, are such powerhouses. And so I'm really excited to be here to chat with you and just, be in community, but also share my knowledge and wisdom with folks who are listening. So thank you so much for the invite again.
Oh my God, the pleasure is all mine. Thank you so much, Luis. So, Luis, let's go back in time, because here's the thing, amigas. I love to go and dissect, Luis, before he became the Queer Magic Maker, he was born. And what is his family? Where is your upbringing? So please tell my audience, where are you from?
Okay, I love that you said that, because that's a therapist's bread and butter. We love to go back to the past. We definitely love to uncover, right? Because that's how we get to know folks. And for me, I'm first generation. My parents are from Guatemala and Mexico. And I basically grew up in a home where the Guatemalan culture was very dominant. And so it was mostly what I was exposed to. So I didn't get to really learn about my Mexican side until a lot later on. And so for most of my life, I was going to Guatemala every year, visiting family. I was eating the food, listening to the music. And so that was my norm, the cultura of Guatemala, and seeing the vibrant colors. My family also has indigenous roots. And so a lot of the patterns and even some of the words that I remember hearing were indigenous based. And so a lot of that really shaped who I was. And I think at the beginning of my childhood, because it was so normal, I didn't really think about it. And it wasn't until years later when I did the work, going to therapy, also looking back, that I realized how much of an influence it had on me. Looking at old pictures, I had this one in mind, particularly when you asked, where I was in elementary school and I was wearing my full Guatemalan outfit, all these beautiful colors. And I remember that day because it was the first time I felt different. And I say this because even though I went to a predominantly Latino school and my neighborhood was predominantly Latino, most folks were Mexican. And so I remember coming in with this outfit and people were like, where are you from? Like, where is that from? And me sitting there like, oh, it's from Guatemala. And my teacher asking me, Luis, you have a choice. You could also dress up in more traditional Mexican, or you can do Guatemalan. Which one would you like? If you do Guatemalan, you'll be alone we had like a little culture fair. Yeah, and I said, well, I'm Guatemalan, so I'll go with Guatemala. And I remember sitting in this little table by myself, serving pan dulce de Guatemala and talking about Guatemala. And then all my other, classmates on the Mexican side, talking about Mexico, where their families were from. And so that was one of the first instances where I realized how, all of these intersecting pieces really make up who you are. And for me, that moment, was one moment where I realized how much of an influence my cultura had on me, but also my parents and their practices and the food that we ate and the music we listened to. And my parents were also very religious, and they still are. And so church was also a very big part of our day-to-day. And I say that because even though we didn't go to church every day, there was always some connection to it. Someone from the church coming over, us visiting someone. So very involved. And so that was another factor for me in my childhood that I remember culturally, as well. And so even though I'm not practicing any religion now, I did learn a lot of values from that, helping others, community, caring for, folks in other ways aside from, monetary, right? But prayer, conversation, right? Holding space. And so I think all of those things really shaped me into who I am now, right? As a therapist. And even though there was definitely challenges and a lot of things that happened throughout my life, all of those factors really contributed to how I see the world now, not just in a professional way, but also an individual. And so Queer Magic Maker is something that happened maybe like 4 years ago when I started to really question a lot of those pieces and trying to figure out who I was as an individual after years and years of going through so many different, I think, expectations culturally that my parents had for me, gender-wise, as the first generation-wise, right, about responsibilities to the family, career-wise. And it was actually a really wild time because as I think back into my childhood and like going into that point, I realized in that moment that I had always been a different version of myself. And, a version of me that really wanted to survive and to really wanted to make my parents proud and wanted to fit into the blueprint, right, that we're all given as to what would make life good for us, what would make us happy. And realizing that it didn't. And I think that was a very earth-shattering moment for me because it was at that time where I had also relearned to appreciate a lot of those pieces. I think I was angry for a while during my teenage years because of so many limitations and my parents not being very open and me coming into really myself and learning about my sexuality and really questioning my gender and things like that I started when I was a child, so all of these things kind of like come back and I'm like, wow, it's almost like if you've ever seen a movie where you go back and then you go to the future and then you go to the middle and then you go back. That's what that question when you asked me felt like, because I was thinking like, wow, like it's so many moments that I can share memories of my past, but they didn't make sense until so much later on when I had to really sit there and think, I'm not happy. This is not how I want to be seen in the world. This is not who I thought I was. And so having to unlearn, having to unpack, and having to kind of almost like visit the past, like when you think of like Christmas Carol, right? Like the ghost coming from the past, the present, and the future. That's what it almost felt like.
Yes. Oh my God. I can totally relate to that. I mean, seriously, um, when I was like you were at the event and I was talking about writing the book and how cathartic it was, and going back in my stories and realizing, holy shit, the torture, mental torture that I was putting on myself. And you don't realize that because you're like every day you're going day by day, day by day, day by day, day by day, and you don't really stop to think about it until you sit down with your thoughts or with a therapist.
Yeah,
Right?
you don't have time, Brett. You don't have time to do that, to slow down. And I thought a lot about that. I'm so glad you brought that up, because for a long time I realized that I was in survival mode. That was something my parents taught me, and they were so good at it because that had been most of their life. You know, coming to this country at 13, 14 years old, not knowing the language, leaving their family behind, having to worry about their status. You know, they learned how to survive, and they learned it very well. You know, my parents are very successful by all means when we talk about folks who come to this country with big dreams. You know, they bought their home, they paid it off, they own their cars, they put me through college. They've been great community members. They've supported so many people. They helped their family, you know, get their documentation to be here, sent money back. I mean, they're wonderful people. And yet at the same time, they never had an opportunity to really live the life that they wanted. And I say this with so much conviction because I've heard it from them directly, you know, that they didn't have those opportunities, that they had to work from an early age to be able to support their family and also for them to survive. And so they had to give up on dreams and things that they wanted to do. And I even remember asking my mom once, because she would cut my hair, and I would complain, like, why can't you take me to get it cut somewhere? Like, my friends get it cut somewhere. And I didn't know until later on that she wanted to be a hairdresser. That was like her dream. And so she would cut my hair. And one time she actually cut my ear by accident because I was moving around. You know, I didn't like the process. And she never cut my hair again after that. And I didn't know that there was so much like shame for her around not having been able to do that, something that she wanted to do in her life. And instead she had to work, you know, in a factory for a really long time before she became a parent and then became a homemaker. And so all of those things, right, sit with me because I think back around my own life and the opportunities that they provided for me that oftentimes, you know, I didn't see because it was so normal, right, for someone being born here in a very different experience to just kind of take it at face value. Like, this is, you know, an opportunity. I'll take it. Great. Thank you. You know, your parents nagging you. You need to go to school. You need to study this, and that. And then later on realizing like, wow, you know, a lot of it was not just for you, but in a big way also a healing piece for them and giving you an opportunity that they didn't have. And so I struggled with that a lot because there was so much appreciation for me for them and also a lot of resentment because they didn't think that the way I wanted to do things was as valid because they didn't understand it. You know, when I came out to them, when I shared with them around my own identity, there was a lot of pushback, you know, even career-wise, because they didn't understand where I was coming from. And no matter how I explained it to them, it didn't make sense, you know, because they felt like they had given me this blueprint and I was saying, no, you know, this is not how I want to do it. And so there were a lot of moments like that, I think, in my life when I was growing up where we headbutted a lot. And being the oldest and also having younger siblings, you know, there was a lot of expectations as well of me being the role model, me being the one that, you know, that took care of them, the one that also...
You're parentified as well.
You're super parentified. I would stay with my siblings while they worked all day, like on weekends and also weekdays sometimes. I had to learn how to cook. I had to learn how to clean. And back then there was a lot of confusion for me because I remember from the earliest years, like even being 5-6 years old, that I was already very different. And I know this because I remember being called out a lot, you know, not just by my parents, but by other people who would often say to me, oh, you know, that's only girls do that. Oh, you shouldn't like that. You shouldn't, you know, that color is not for you. And one moment I remember with my cousins, you know, I most of my cousins were actually women, were girls. And so it was so interesting because they were the ones that I was usually around and playing with. And so my parents kind of expected me to have these action figures while they played with their Barbies. And I remember when we were alone, I would be like rolling them in like the Barbies in toilet paper and making them these beautiful outfits and scarves that I would see in novelas. And they loved it. You know, they're like, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. Can you make mine a dress? And I remember doing that and loving it. And then one time when they caught me, they were very upset, and they said to me, boys don't do that. Boys don't dress dolls. They don't play with dolls. They don't make dresses. And I remember being very confused and thinking, like, I enjoy it so much, and feeling forced to play with these action figures instead of these dolls. And other moments like that, don't sit that way. Don't say those words. Don't look like that, with your face. Don't touch your hair that way. Boys don't do this, boys don't do that. So I had that from a very, very early age, where I felt, not just because of the culture, but the religion, there was so much stigma and shame. And not even just from my parents, other family members at school, teachers, people at church. And so I grew up constantly feeling like I was being told, don't be yourself. Don't do that. You can't be who you are. And when I look back at that time, I remember how creative I was. I used to love drawing and creating dresses for dolls, and I used to love colors, and I would even try to choose, my own clothes, and I would be told, no, that's not, for boys. You can't wear that color, or we're not going to put that on you, blah, blah, blah. Even hairstyles. Remember the first time I told my mom, I want to get my hair cut this way, and they would say, no, we're not going to cut it that way. You're going to get it cut. They would use the word normal a lot. You're going to get it cut the normal way. And I look, and with my family, it's been a journey. I think it's been a lot of ups and downs. But even when I think back, for them, it was a lot of fear, because they didn't understand. They didn't know what was happening. And so they did what they knew. Right? They turned to the church. They turned to people that they felt could help them. And unfortunately, that was not the greatest, right, response for me, at least, because of a lot of the religious trauma that I had to go through, a lot of the confusion that I experienced at a very young age, a lot of the feeling rejected, because I had to really shift who I was. And so I remember even intentionally forcing myself, like, I need to be like one of the other boys, and like trying to play sports and hating it, trying to like dress like them and hating it, all of these things, but doing it because I felt like it would make them happy, it would make them proud of me. And I was always very academically inclined, so I loved school, straight A student, I never had issues with anything at school, had attendance, perfect attendance, won the spelling bees, had trophies. So they loved that. That was, I think, for me also a way to, I think in my head, almost balance out the shame that they felt with the pride. And so I excelled in school. I did it not just for them, but also for myself.
Badge of honor. Yeah.
Badge of honor. And so many of us do that, right? So many of us who are overachievers or high achievers or people who are very successful, a lot of times we really did it because it got us this recognition and validation. And, people noticed us because we were doing so well. And at the same time, it came at a cost, right? That there was almost this unrealistic expectation on how we're supposed to exist in the world because of these factors. So with my parents, I wasn't allowed to really make mistakes. And when I did, it was almost like a big disappointment, that it felt like, oh my gosh, I messed up. They're not going to love me anymore because I didn't get a perfect score on this, or because they got a call from the teacher, or because I didn't get into this program. And so all of that, like almost like survival, right, that kicked in of like, I just need to make sure that I'm loved, that I am taken care of, that I'm not in danger, and that, I'm appreciated as a person. And so I took on this persona for a long time. And it wasn't until, like I was saying earlier, right, 4 years ago, and this was through like so many like different
iterations of you, personality, identities, all the things I can imagine.
Exactly. And exploring that in therapy. I've had about 6 to 8 therapists up to this point since I started therapy about 10 years ago. And I've gone to them for different reasons at different times in my life. Yeah. And all of them have been an accumulation of me unpacking and really learning about who I am, my relationship with my parents, my religious trauma, my self-expression, my career. I mean, there's been so many different reasons that I've gone, and each time has really allowed me to almost put the puzzle together and figure out who I am, with at the same time taking all these things into account, because I can't get rid of them, right? They make me.
They make you, You get to honor it.
You get to honor it in a different way, though, right? Not the way that you were told, but in the way that makes sense to you. And that makes it so much more special and valuable.
Right. You know, when, oh my God, there's so much I can unpack here. I'm like, in what direction do we go? You know,
Right.
you know, it's kind of like the Wheel of Fortune. Where do you want to go? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, let me tell you something. I agree with you in so many stages because I'm also first generation. You know, I'm first generation Mexican American. First to do everything, and be parentified and the whole 9 yards, and thinking, is this my only path? And then figuring out that, for me at least, now the path that I'm leading, it took me 17 years into my career as a lawyer to be this empowerment coach, and the shame that comes from that. I can only imagine with you, Luis, like knowing that you were, we're not going to say different, that you just were not, you know, what everybody else was seeing, meaning like when you were 6 years old, you know, and so it must have taken a lot of work, and it must have taken a lot of bravery for you to get to where you are right now. So let's go back in time where you decided enough is enough. I'm not going to follow your book. I'm going to begin my own book. When was that point in your life?
Yeah. So first, I just want to say thank you for mentioning what you said and for sharing your story as well, because I very much relate to that. It took a really long time. And, you know, it was because, like I said, there were so many moments of going into survival that you don't get to slow down until later on, right? You have the career, you have the life that you thought, you know, you wanted, and then you're kind of sitting there like, is this what I wanted? And then you decide, right? And things change for so many of us, career-wise, relationship-wise, even like our idea of fun changes, our idea of, you know, what's more valuable to us changes. So I just want to acknowledge that, because you're absolutely right. It takes so much time, and I've been sitting with that so much in the last month, I would say, where I always wonder, if I knew all of this before, like back then, like where would I be right now? Like if I was already like empowered and I was like in my 20s, like, you know, I knew who I was. And then I always remind myself, you know what, Luis, that wasn't the time for you then, because you had to get here, and you're here now, and now you know, and you don't have to be stuck in the past, and you also don't have to worry about the future, because the future is going to be something new and special, because now you know who you are. And so, you know, going back in time when I first started to, I want to say, question and also really think about who I am as a person, it came out of anger. It came out of anger and sadness. And I love talking about emotions in my practice, because I think that a lot of them get a bad rap. You know, we always say negative emotions, positive, but they're not negative or positive. They're just emotions that we experience. And because we're human, we have such an amazing capacity to experience different things, right? In that way. And so for me, the anger was really coming from the feeling of lack of justice, that I'm doing all of these things that I was told. You know, I was working at Kaiser at that point. I had basically got into this job that I was told was the ultimate, like, you know, for a therapist, right? 6 figures, private office, great location, amazing benefits. You know, and I was there. I had my window view of downtown San Francisco. I, you know, would get to dress up very like nice and go in there. My parents were super proud. My paychecks were great. You know, I had all of these like amazing things. But I was miserable. I remember my 3rd month there already feeling like burnt out, feeling like I had to pretend to be someone else because I couldn't really show myself. And up to that point, I hadn't really embraced my queer identity. I think I was still trying to figure out a lot about myself, and even struggling with the concept of gender and being told, you know, you're male, like you're supposed to dress, act, think this way, even if you're gay, right? Because at that point I identified, that was my sexuality being gay. You know, I was in a relationship with my partner already, but there was so much more than just my sexuality that was not connected to who I was as a person. And so at that point when I was at Kaiser, I was also struggling with that. And, you know, I had gained quite a amount of weight from overeating, stress eating. I had developed pre-diabetes. And the interesting thing is that my family, most of them have diabetes. And it was the one thing I remember my mom constantly saying to me, don't get diabetes, don't get diabetes, always saying that. And even hearing my doctor always ask me like, hey, does your family have a history of diabetes? I'm like, oh my gosh, all of them have it.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah. And they would say to me, then you're more likely to get it, Luis. And so I remember even that being in the back of my head, but having so much stress and even like anxiety about work that I think in those times I wasn't really thinking about it. I don't think I was taking care of myself, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't have the ability to. I was so caught up on trying to make this role work and be successful that I got lost in in I think what a lot of therapists get lost in, which is usually caring about everyone else and not yourself. And that does happen very easily for us because the work that we do essentially is to care for others and support others. But we can't do that if we don't take care of ourselves. And even though I knew that, it was almost like secondary to me because I was in this space where I knew people needed me. And I realized now when I look back, it wasn't even about me. It was really the system I was working in. They didn't care. Kaiser's on strike again right now. A lot of my colleagues are on strike who are still there. And it's because year after year, they continue to push very unrealistic expectations on the therapists. They continue to, underpay, overwork, and also not give quality of care to their clients. And so even when I was there years ago, I sensed it. And I remember by halfway through the year, like 6 months, I started to get really depressed where I would cry in the mornings before I had to go to work and thinking, oh my gosh, like this cannot be like, when it was almost like something you love turning into something you hated because it just didn't feel good.
Yes. Oh my God. I don't mean to cut you off, but it takes me back to it shouldn't hurt to work.
Not like that. Not like that. And that time, 6 months, COVID hit. So I was there when, everything started to shut down, and working at a hospital during COVID was probably super intense compared to a lot of other spaces because every day we heard some alarm go off. Every day we were told we had to put a mask on because someone was coming into the hospital, sick, or they didn't know when someone tested positive or this or that. And so it was a lot of anxiety as well with that. And I remember that the first time they told us, y'all are gonna go work from home. We're not gonna work here at the office. I had never worked from home. I didn't even know what was going on at that time. I'm getting really worried seeing these like reports and constant people who were really sick coming in and sometimes not even not getting good news. And I took all my stuff, I went to work from home. And so those last 6 months, maybe like four months that I was there, I worked from home. And that helped a little bit. One, because I didn't have to go into this place that I constantly dreaded, but I got to see my clients and have less contact with a lot of the folks that were really causing the stress for me. But it also made me think a lot. I remember sitting there like thinking so much about life because of COVID happening. I mean, I think all of us, right? We probably sat there at one point or another, questioned where we were in life, questioned what we wanted, reflected. It really challenged us as people, when you have a global pandemic that way. And so for me, not only was I worrying about forced reflection. No, that is really what it was, because I think it's a moment where you can't do anything. You have to slow down. You're forced to slow down because there's no choice now to keep going. Like I couldn't say, oh, I'm going to go out to the club tonight. I'm going to go, have the coffee here. I'm going to go. Nothing was open. So I remember sitting there and thinking so much. And I think it was at that point where there was so much anger and sadness and confusion that I was like, what is going on? Why am I doing this? Like, is this what I thought I wanted to do? And I started to also feel so negatively about myself. Physically, emotionally, mentally, and I was tired of it. And I kept thinking, all of these things, are they me or are they things that I keep being given that I don't want? And it was in that moment where I started to get really angry and challenge a lot at work, and speak up a lot more, and also just I think questioning myself as a person. And it wasn't until maybe the last 2 months that I was at Kaiser. My parents both got COVID. They were in the hospital. They were not doing well. I didn't know what was going to happen. And I had asked them if I could do remote and go back to LA. And at this point I was in the Bay Area, and my manager at the time was like, no, you have an obligation here. And I remember feeling so stuck, like the guilt tripping of, you have people here who need you, you have clients who need you, you can't just go. And me thinking, no, like that's not right. Like I need to go see my parents and help my family. And so I ended up going through HR, and they were like, of course you can go, please. Like, here's the paperwork, get it signed. You know, my manager at that time, almost like, and I think in their refusal, messed up my paperwork where it was extending me leaving. That I think at that point I was just like so frustrated, feeling like I'm not appreciated. I'm being almost like retaliated for wanting to leave, and I'm also worried about my parents while I'm still being expected to see my clients. And when I finally got that, I went home. You know, I was able to help my mom get her medical stuff. They left the hospital, they recovered, but they still have a lot of prolonged issues, like even breathing sometimes. But at that time, I remember helping my mom through all of that. And I started to explore the idea of starting my own business, starting my own practice. Yes. And I thought, why don't I just start my own practice? Because if I do that, then I'll be able to actually do what I love and work with the people that I want to work with, you know, instead of feeling like I'm being exploited, you know, because even at Kaiser, I was the only Spanish speaking therapist. I was the only queer therapist. I was the only one that was practicing.
You were it.
I was
you
it.
Were
I was
it.
And
you
so
were it.
They knew that. They knew that. And they continuously bombarded me with these things. And so at that point I was like, you know what, if I leave, I can do my practice, and I think I would benefit a lot more. And it was through community that happened, because I reached out to my friend Adriana Alejandra from Latinx Therapy, who was like, Luis, I have a course, you should take it, come check it out, you know, it'll tell you everything you need to start your private practice. I did that. I connected with other colleagues, and the last couple of weeks before I was supposed to go back after my break, my manager calls me, and they basically said, are you coming back? And if you're coming back, when can we expect you? And not even in a like, how are you kind of way, like what are you, like, are you, you know, what are your plans? And I remember that moment, like still not even having launched anything, but I had learned, I was putting my ducks in a row.
Right.
I was thinking there like, oh my gosh, like, I don't know what happened, but it came out. And I remember saying to her, no, I'm not coming back. So I'm putting in my 2 weeks and I'll send you my letter. And all she said was, okay, thanks, and hangs up on me. And I go, okay, now I have no choice. I got to do this, right?
Yeah,
I don't have a
you got to take action.
I got to take action. And it was in that moment that I was like, you know what, I'm done. So I sent in my 2 weeks notice, and I started to do my practice. And originally I was going into this place of like professional, and I need to do this and that. And I think there was in that moment where I was like, you know what? I just took a big risk and left this job that everyone, you know, was praising me for, and my parents too. And I wasn't happy. I need to do what's going to make me happy now. This is my business. I want to make it so that I am proud of it, and so the people that need me and need to work with me will come to me. And I don't know what went on in that moment, but I remember my partner also being one of those big like motivators and supportive people who was like, you know, babe, like you should just show up how you feel you want to show up. And I remember asking him too, babe, do you think that I could? And at that point I was also trying to really connect my love for fashion that I had for so many years, because even back then when him and I were dating, I would make his shirts for him, and I would like literally create them, that he was like, you know, you should look into that too, to see if that's something that you can do on the side that might be enjoyable, or you can incorporate it into your work. Right. And I was like thinking like, oh, I'm like, I never thought about that. I always thought you had to be this or that, and you know, that's what you did. And so he was one of those people that was extremely supportive. And I remember telling him, you know, I don't think I can go back into being a fashion designer. Like, I feel like it's too much, but do you think I could be a model? And, you know, I look at him and he goes, yeah, babe, of course. And I was sitting there like, I hope he says that, you know, he better say that. But he was like, yeah, of course, babe. I totally think you could be a model. And so it's so interesting because these things all happened at the same time.
At the same time. It's like the universe is gifting you.
It was like it was saying, Luis, don't limit yourself this time. Go for everything that you want and see where it takes you. And so I launched my practice, but what I did while I was launching it was I started to find clothes that I liked. I dressed up. I started playing with makeup, because these are things that I always wanted to do, that I was so trapped in this cage of what I had been told was me, that I was terrified. I was judgmental of others. I remember seeing other queer folks who were so beautiful and, like, you know, were unapologetic, and thinking, oh my gosh, like I could never be like that. You know, what do people say about me? And it was never me. It was what I had been told that people would say about me. And so when I was finally able to let go of that, which was not easy because it was painful.
Yeah,
it was excruciating. It was so much fear around finally being okay and accepting these parts of myself that I tried so hard to get rid of, that it took time to even like say, it's okay, Luis, and it's gonna be fine. And even if people don't understand, it's not about them. And that really took me to a new level, because when I started my practice, I started to really show up as myself. And I decided I want to make a queer and BIPOC practice where I see folks that need to see me, because I know when I was growing up, I never had that. You know, I got the total opposite. Folks that didn't understand me, that would question me, that would make comments, you know, people that I always felt weren't really supportive but more critical. And I thought, I want to be that person that has gone through this journey and can support others while they're on it, because I'm on this right now. It hasn't ended for me. And I think all of that inspiration really motivated me to take these risks. And so my first photo shoot, when I did my private practice, I was like, I'm not wearing a suit and tie. I'm not wearing that sweater vest I used to wear like all those times, you know, when I was in the nonprofit world and then going into Kaiser. And I actually went into my closet, put all of those in a plastic bag, and I took them to Goodwill and I donated them. And I was like, I am never wearing this crap again.
I'm not wearing this shit ever in my life.
I never wear this shit again. And I ended up getting some ruffles, getting some sparkly stuff, getting stuff that was like, I was always drawn to, that was fun. And I would dress up and do my pictures and go on my site. And I remember even like the thought of, are people going to want to work with me? If they see me, are there people that want to work with me? That first year, I had over 30 clients that wanted to work with me. I had a wait list. I had to tell people like, I can't, you know, right now, this is my capacity. And that was the moment I realized, like, wow, if I had just been myself, which is what we tell people, but it's so hard because it's not easy. All of the possibilities that open up to you, because you move from this space of scarcity into abundance, and you start to embrace and accept things, and the people that need to see you, and you're not just playing a game anymore around trying to like be someone that you're not, but instead the people that don't see you, don't appreciate you, they move away. And that's totally fine, because I remember even in those moments, there were people that did see me, that reached out to me, that connected with me, that sent clients to me. And, you know, that's also where my modeling career started, where I started to submit photos, got a lot of no's, had some people that were like, yeah, let's do it. Like, let's do some photos, yada, yada. Walked in a few shows that were queer specific. And I remember getting that adrenaline again for something that I had always wanted to do, but didn't think I could do.
Yes, but now you're like, this is like so much fun.
Yeah.
I feel like you're back to what a true kid should feel like. Fun,
there you go.
Right?
That inner child that really wanted that and needed it and didn't get it because of, you know, being told it wasn't okay. And that's what it felt like. I felt like a kid. I felt like this kid learning about themselves, exploring, playing with different things. And this is going on 4 years now. And when I look at where I'm at now, you know, my practice having grown, now I have a partner who's one of my closest friends who also runs the practice with me. I have been modeling. I've been paid to go out and walk for shows. I've done photo shoots with countless photographers. I've done campaigns. I've spoken about fashion and activism as, you know, ways to really express ourselves and our culture and embrace our identity. So many opportunities with so many different groups, and all of these folks who saw and valued the work that I did and reached out and connected and really gave back. It wasn't just what can you do for us, it was like, how can we help you, Luis? And so those were the relationships that I really started to nurture, and they were very healing for me, because it was the first time where I felt like I didn't have to pretend to be or do anything, and people just liked me for me showing up, rather than before where was this anxiety of I need to be perfect, I need to be professional, I need to be the good son, I need to be the good, you know, sibling, the good, all of this. And all it did was make me feel like I was going to implode
Yeah.
from so much. That now it was like, I'm showing up as myself. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to try my best to be the person that I want to be and not the person I'm being told I need to be. And all of that shifted it, you know? So now I look at myself and I'm like, I have never felt as happy as I have the last 4 years. And you know, when I share that with people, I don't want people to think that I didn't have moments of happiness in my life before, because there's so many moments of joy. But I think now the joy comes so naturally because it doesn't feel like I have to earn it.
Yeah. Oh.
You know, it feels like I deserve it. Oh, I'm getting emotional, but it's just,
Yeah.
and that's what I want for other people. That's why I do this work. That's why I do these talks. That's why I go on podcasts. That's why I started to show myself, because that was another big question for me. Do I want to be seen this way? Do I want to go on social media? Do I want to, do these things?
Please do.
Thank
No,
you.
I get it. Listen, I'm 50 years old and I'm finally doing what I love.
Yeah.
I mean, truly. I mean, it just doesn't stop. It really, and it is just taking that leap of faith
Yeah.
that those that are meant to be will be.
Absolutely.
And will be there with you no matter what.
Absolutely. And we're constantly growing, right? And shedding and becoming new people. And I like to use the term late bloomers, because I always think of like how I'm almost 40 now. I'm I didn't start to really know who I was until my mid 30s, almost like coming close to 40. And I thought, in my younger years, oh my gosh, when I hit 30, like if I don't have things figured out. And then I cannot even share with you how excited I am for my 40s and my 50s and my 60s, because I think about how
fabulous. Jeez.
I think about that, yes, and I'm so excited about it, because I always thought, what we were told about youth, and I thought, my youth, I have so much love for that version of myself that sometimes I'll cry, because I think about all of the things that they went through and that happened to them because they didn't know, and no one was there to explain it to them, and no one was there to say it's okay, you're going to be fine. That now I look back, and that's the part of me that I think I nurture the most, because I realized that they were just trying to survive. Me in my 20s to my 30s, I was just trying to figure things out. I was just trying to be okay. I was just trying to find love. I was just trying to, be accepted. That now when I look back, I think I don't have, how some folks are like, oh my gosh, like I don't want to think about my 20s, or I hated this version of me, or, oh, like, I was so different. I always think like, no, I was the same. I was just in a very different place and didn't see the possibilities, because I didn't think that I would be able to get to this point. No one had ever told me what my life could be as a queer person, as first generation, as, all of these intersecting pieces of myself. No one ever said, Luis, these are the possibilities, because I only got one, and it wasn't the one for me. And so I felt like a failure. And it wasn't until I moved to this other side where I was like, my life could be so much more. There could be so many other things that bring me joy, that even my idea of success shifted. I started to value time more than money, because I felt like time gave me the opportunity to breathe and be slow. And even with my practice now, I work 3 days a week. I put time into the other things that I love, whether it's fashion. I started selling my candle that I created, to inspire people. I started to do my podcast, and, I get some financial stuff from that. But I think for me, at the end of the day, it's really more about the joy that I get and the connection and the people. And then all of that has turned into opportunities. So at the end of the day, even whether it was the intention or not, it's become a career as well. And I love it. It was something I didn't think would be valued, and that's what held me back for so long. That after I started moving, the last 4 years have felt like a whirlwind. I spent 2 more years up in the Bay before I moved. I think this is my second year in LA, and I'm originally from here, but I had been away for almost 13 years, mostly because of the family stuff, mostly because there was a lot of trauma and shame for me here about me growing up. That when I finally realized this was the place I needed to be, because this is where the opportunities were coming, not just as a therapist, but also as a model and someone working in fashion, my partner was like, let's go, we can move back. And we moved, and my second year here, and it has been a whirlwind. Like, just so much that has come into place because of that moment, 4 years ago, where I was just like, I can't
Yes.
do, this is not my life.
No, it's not. And how fabulous your life is now. And so what can we expect? What are we expecting from you from here on out?
Yeah, right now I'm putting a lot of energy into doing a lot more speaking, because I realize that my work as a therapist is so special, but it's also very individual based, right? It's one-on-one, which I love. And I definitely encourage folks out there who have thought about it or have maybe wanted to go back. If you have the opportunity to go to therapy, there's so many reasons to go, or to even like find mentorship or find a group or anything like that supports your mental health. I'm a firm believer that healing comes through many avenues, and it doesn't always have to be therapy, but sometimes it does, and it helps. I love practicing healing rituals. I love to have friends that nurture me and support me, get together with them. I love to do exploring and going to museums and things that inspire me. And so I always tell folks, do more of those things, because they will help you. And so for me right now, I'm doing a lot more speaking because it reaches so many folks. And I cannot tell you how powerful it is for me to go into these spaces and platforms and just talk about my story, and then have so many people come over after, who not all of them identify as queer, but share with me like, I connect with this piece of your story. I felt when you shared that, I almost felt like I knew you, because you were sharing this that felt so much like my experience. And being able to leave knowing that there were folks there who didn't feel alone, and I didn't feel alone anymore. And so for me, that's why I've been doing a lot more speaking. So I've been trying to get more projects rolling out. I just did a Beyond the Runway brunch that I hosted at Chismosa Cafe with my friend Natalie. And we started that because we wanted to talk about fashion as a form of activism and go beyond just like the trends and what we see in the media and Fashion Week, but really talk about us as individuals, bringing in all of our beauty and letting it shine through in not only the clothes we wear, but the way we have our hair, the way that we wear makeup, the way that we even just don't do these things, right? And embrace and find empowerment through it. So that's something that I'm really loving right now, is talking about how these things intersect for me, the mental health and the fashion work, and just really dismantling oppressive beauty and fashion narratives. So that's something I'm doing. I'm also going to be working on launching the second season of my podcast, which is Queer Magic. I have the first season. And right, the podcast is work. I mean, it's a lot of love and time.
OMG, yes. I've been doing this since COVID. Like, who knew this was going to happen? So I have over 200 episodes.
Amazing. And it's work, right? I mean, it definitely it's a lot of love, a lot of love to do it.
I love it. I feel like the next step is, because I'm the one that pays for everything. Mm-hmm. So I'm like,
same here. Entrepreneur life.
I feel like, okay, I think I can get people to pay for it now. You know what I mean?
There you go.
Right? So I'm like, okay, so explore those chapters. But the thing is that, at least for me, this is how I feel when I get on the mic. I just know that whatever's going to happen, it happens organically. That's why for me, I don't have candid questions. It's just, it's like we're chatting, we're friends.
Yeah.
And what do we do as friends? Pues allí chismear, platicar, y ya nomás charlar, and just talk about our day, our past, what our future might be, and it's just all beautiful. So for me, this is such an important piece of my business, and I know that this is going to be a very important piece for you, because you get to now spread more light internationally, beyond LA, beyond Bay Area, it could be all over the world. So
Yeah. And that's the goal.
you know what?
That's the goal. So, even with my podcast, it's been about a year since my first season, and I'll have folks ask me, and I tell them, I'm doing this with so much love and intention that I don't want to rush it, and it will come as it needs to. And so right now I'm starting to gear up because, like I said, this last 2 years have been a whirlwind. And even this year, I had so many events that I attended, so many places I spoke at, so many projects that I did. And so there was just no capacity for it, and that's why I'm starting to gear up to do it again. And that's why I do this. I love going on podcasts with other folks because you're right, there is such a special, I think, just moment that happens when you hold space for someone else. And even though the conversation is very much like the people in it, other folks who listen can get something from it, right? They can also feel like they're a part of it.
Yeah,
there you go.
nugget.
And that's it. That's all you need.
That really, really, truly.
Yeah.
Oh, ay, amigo. Mira, I know that we're getting at the tail end of our conversation. I always ask my guests if they could provide 1 or 2 tips on how an amiga can handle her shit. Do you have some tips for me?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I thought a lot about this question because I know you and I chatted, and I was like, what would I say to folks? And I think the one thing that has been sitting with me a lot, and I actually shared this on Instagram recently, was about not finding competition in others. Because when we do that, right, what we do is we start to compare. We start to compare ourselves, and comparison really takes the joy out of being in our own journey and being present. And for me, what I started to practice instead of a comparison is practicing joy for others. So when I see other people thrive and something comes in, I remind myself, hey, this is not about you. This is about them. And this moment of joy comes up for me around seeing other people thrive. And it makes me happy that people are really putting this energy out there. And it's almost like, and these are mental exercises. I always tell people, you have to actually do this actively. So, because I think we all compare ourselves. Right? I mean, that's a very natural thing. We're all taught to do it. We go on social media, we look at other people, but we never really know the story behind things. So for me, moving away from comparison and instead practicing joy for others has been super healing, and it's allowed me to focus on my own journey and not feel like I need to be taken into all these other directions, and instead think about like, wow, like I'm so happy for them. Now, where am I? What do I need to do? What am I wanting to do? And so that's tip number 1, is moving away from the comparison and into practicing joy for others, right? Moving away from the scarcity mentality into abundance, and instead seeing it, there's enough for everyone. We can all be in a spotlight. We can all embrace one another, be inspired by others rather than feel like we need to be like others. So that's tip number 1. And tip number 2, like I said earlier, I think it's really about finding things that inspire you, because we put so much of this on hold, right? I don't have time for that. I got to do this. I got to do that. And sometimes we'll sit there, we have, and I'm a firm believer that we can make time. We can make it. I mean, there's stuff sometimes that we don't have to do, that we'll do because we just feel like we have to do. And instead, I'm encouraging folks to look into things that actually inspire them. Is it like scrapbooking? Is it putting flowers in your home? Is it, lighting a candle and just taking a moment to breathe and be present? Is it going to a museum, that you've been thinking about or that you've gone to that you miss? Is it like being by the ocean, right? And just feeling small, because all of those things, what they do is that they nurture us and they reconnect us into the world that we're in. And they allow us to move away from the busy mentality that we all have into more of this space of pondering about life, right? A lot of us don't like to do that because it is a little scary sometimes when we start to question things, when we reflect, when we're sitting there kind of like reevaluating. But that's the discomfort that brings growth. And that's a discomfort that we all need to go through to move forward, rather than the security or the false sense of safety of being stuck somewhere.
Yes. I feel like I'm in a therapy session. I'm in trance.
I'll send you the bill. I'm just kidding.
You know what? That is so funny that you say that, because I have an uncle that says, don't talk to her. She's going to send you a bill. Because my legal bill.
Right?
It's the funniest thing. Yes. But really, seriously, with all heart, I am so grateful that you're here. I know that this episode is really going to impact one of my listeners out there, because we're sometimes so scared del que dirán, right? Yeah. And I think that is very common in the Latino culture.
Yeah.
When they come to a different country, which is America, they do things so trepidatiously because their fear of retaliation, fear of being judged. And I feel like this episode is going to enlighten someone and empower them to just go for it.
Yeah. That's my hope. That's my hope. Fear is normal, right? It keeps us safe, and also being brave. You can't be brave without being afraid, because that's part of it. And so it's pushing through, and I had a conversation with an amiga yesterday, and she was telling me the same thing. And I said to her, you know what? I had 2 therapists once tell me, Luis, people got their own life to worry about. They probably see you, make a quick judgment, and then they got all their own stuff to worry about. You can't focus on other people's thoughts, because it will waste your time. And then another one told me, I kept telling them the fear of not being liked, and they said, Luis, I guarantee you there's people who don't like you, because there are 8 billion people in the world, and a lot of them will not like you, but a lot of them will love you. Focus on the ones that love you, because if you spend all your time trying to get the ones that don't like you to like you, you're going to waste your life.
Yeah.
So live your life. And that was so powerful. So that's what I want to say to people. Yeah. The people that don't see it, they won't, and they probably never will. And that's okay, because then you will find people that do, and they will appreciate it, and they will love you and nurture it. And you will find people that truly, truly, truly can hold space for you and make you feel like you belong. And that's, I think, what we're all looking for.
Oh my God, I love that. Well, thank you so much for being here. I know that this will not be the first time. I will reach out to you again. Maybe we can do some collaborations. You never know. No pasa nada.
Please do. Keep me in mind. I'll keep you in mind as well. I love this, and I really appreciate you holding space. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much, Luis. Thank you for being here on Amiga Handle Your Shit podcast.